Hi, everybody. You're listening to Radio Cherry Bombe, and I'm your host, Carrie Diamond, coming to you from New York City. We are officially kicking off Jubilee in July. What's that? It's a celebration of Jubilee, our amazing annual conference that was held this past April at the Glass House in New York City. Over 1,000 people attended, and our speakers included some of the most inspiring women I know. Today, and over the next few weeks, you are going to get to hear from them. Whether you were there and want to hear everything again, or you couldn't join us this year because tickets were sold out, whatever reason, you get to listen to all the wisdom that was shared on the stage. Today, we're sharing a conversation about Edna Lewis, the legendary chef who many regard as the godmother of farm-to-table cooking. Edna celebrated local ingredients, seasonality, and Southern traditions, and became one of the most revered culinary figures in America today. This year marks the 50th anniversary of her landmark book, The Taste of Country Cooking. Toni Tipton-Martin, the culinary historian and author, and Nina Williams-Mbengue, Edna Lewis's niece and board member of the Edna Lewis Foundation, are interviewed on the Jubilee stage by Adrienne Cheatham of the Chef's Cut podcast. Introducing the trio is Adé Carrena, chef, cultural storyteller, and filmmaker. Thank you to our Jubilee partners, Resy, American Express, San Pellegrino, Ghirardelli, California Prunes, Square, and Veuve Clicquot. And thank you to everyone else who made the day so special, including our amazing volunteers. The next big Cherry Bombe event is Farmers and Makers, and it's taking place in Paso Robles, California, September 25th to 27th. It's a weekend of tastings, dinners, conversations, and special events in honor of the International Year of the Woman Farmer and the women behind what we eat and drink. Weekend passes are on sale right now at cherrybombe.com. The link is in our show notes. This episode is brought to you by Resy and American Express. Resy is a digital platform that connects restaurants to restaurant lovers. The best-in-class software elevates dining experiences, provides original industry content, and helps fill some of the industry's most exciting tables. Because restaurants have always been more than just a place to eat. The amazing world of restaurants is just a few taps away in the Resy app and at resy.com.
Hey, y'all. My name is Adé Carrena. I am a chef, cultural storyteller, and filmmaker based in North Carolina. And I'm originally from Benin. Shout out to North Carolina. I hear you back there. I am also an entrepreneur, as I am the founder of iLéWA Foods, a purpose-driven spice company supporting women farmers and producers from Benin and Ghana. I hear you back there too. Thank you. While building equitable global food systems. How is that for a mission statement? This is, in fact, my first Jubilee, and I'm so thrilled to be here. Yes. This year marks the 50th anniversary of Chef Edna Lewis's landmark book, The Taste of Country Cooking. 50 years later, you're still clapping like this. This book has introduced countless chefs and home cooks to seasonal cooking and cemented Edna's place as the godmother of American farm-to-table cuisine and one of the country's most influential culinary figures. Nina Williams-Mbengue is Edna's niece, a longtime child welfare advocate, master gardener, and board member of the Edna Lewis Foundation. She also helped her aunt type her manuscript, The Taste of Country Cooking, when she was just 12 years old, y'all. That's how old my daughter is. That's amazing. Toni Tipton-Martin is a culinary historian known for celebrating the vital contribution of Black cooks throughout history and has written several books, including The Jemima Code and Jubilee. Yes, yes. She received the James Beard Foundation Lifetime Achievement Award in 2025. Amazing. Chef Adrienne Cheatham is the co-host of the Chef's Cut podcast and author of the Sunday Best Cookbook. This is yes, clap for Adrienne, yes. This is Adrienne's third appearance at Jubilee. Let's give a warm welcome to Nina, Toni, and Adrienne. Yes.
Happy Jubilee, everybody. It's so great to be here today and to see so many familiar faces. So I'd first like to start off by saying that nobody moderates these two women who are on this stage today. But I will help facilitate a conversation. Let's look at it that way. Nobody moderates Miss Toni or Miss Nina. But being asked to moderate this panel is a true honor. These are two women who, whether they know it or not, have played such an instrumental role in the shaping of American cuisine. And we are here to celebrate the 50th anniversary of this pivotal book and its profound impact on our industry. So, Miss Toni, I cannot literally believe it's been 50 years since this book came out. It seems just as timely, relevant, and beautiful as it ever did. And you've studied this book over the years. You've also known Miss Edna personally. But can you tell us why this book is so important to American cuisine?
Well, thank you guys for having us here and for your interest in this topic. Miss Lewis is very important to the two of us, but she's also, as you said, important to the community, the food world, and just the world in general, as evidenced by her image on a U.S. postage stamp, in case you did not know that. So that's pretty incredible. I had to run out and get one after the fact. I paid a lot of money for it on eBay. Miss Edna Lewis, we are speaking a lot now about her engagement as one of the leaders in the farm-to-table movement and her interest and pursuit of preserving interest in seasonal and local food. But none of that was the way she was referred to at the time. She came along at a time when recipes were written in a very succinct, narrow manner. There was not a lot of interest in storytelling. And so she was not originally taken very well, and people just thought she was an extension of the standard Southern farm, rural community. And it took many years for people to begin to understand the depth and breadth of what she was really communicating to us. And so that is what is still true today. Every new generation encounters her through their own lenses, and yet there are those variables that continue, that are timeless. I write in the foreword that even though I did not grow up in a farm and I'm also not a chef, every word resonates for me, and she makes me want to go into the kitchen. She inspires you to want to seek out the most fresh and seasonal food that you can find, even if you don't grow it. You can go to the farmer's market. The last thing I'll say is that she also inspires us with her competency. And so I think the original perception of her writing and her words was that she was unnecessarily verbose, and she was just like the old grandmother that doesn't, know when to stop talking. But every word is so instructive. Her narratives are really personal, as if she was standing there with you. And you can't help but fall in love with the idea of making something as simple as a blackberry cobbler with just 3 ingredients. Or what is inspiring to me is her interest in the pursuit of classical cooking as well. So she's just rings all the bells.
And I love that, because Nina talks in other interviews that you've done about being sent to the South. That was something that used to happen with black families in the U.S. is I was sent to Mississippi every summer of my childhood, and you were sent to Virginia from the Bronx every summer. And reading Miss Edna's book is more what I know of Southern cooking, like fried chicken, collard greens. Sure, that's the greatest hits. But there is so much more to it. It's regional and hyper-specific and hyper-local. And Nina, you were just 12 years old when you were typing up this book. Right. But what do you remember most vividly about that experience working with your aunt? And what did that teach you about your family and your community?
Gosh, there were so many things. And again, it's an honor being here in front of all of you. Some of the most vivid things were reading her yellow legal pads. She would type one sentence on a whole page, and that would drive me crazy. I'd be, Aunt Edna, you got to put a period in there. You got to put a comma in there somewhere. And these long lists of this wonderful food, quail and squab and lamb's quarter. And just, I had no idea at the time what a legacy that would be for me and learning about and understanding my family. Also in testing the recipes, following her and her sister Jenny out in the woods in Freetown, in the cow fields actually, picking blackberries, wandering behind them, and they're talking about the old folks in Freetown. I just remember that, following along behind them, the blackberry brambles getting caught in my hair and my skin. And it was joy. And then we'd go home and have those blackberries. And the next day we'd have a blackberry cobbler. We'd work on blackberry jelly and blackberry jam. You know, those types of things I remember so much. And just the fact that she talked so beautifully and eloquently about Freetown, the community of freed slaves that she grew up in, and the fact that she learned how to cook from her grandparents who lived into their 90s when she was about 12 years or so. And she was raised by them, and here I am in 2026. She helped raise me. My mom was a single parent, so I was raised by someone who was raised by a former slave. It's just amazing to me, and that's made an indelible impact on my life and my concept of who I am.
That's cool. So you're saying that Miss Edna was a great chef, but not necessarily a great writer? You mean chefs aren't great writers? I mean, come on. We're not known for our attention to detail with grammar, that is for sure. But I also want to know, like, it's been 50 years since A Taste of Country Cooking came out. What do you think, and this, I'll start with you, Miss Toni, what do you think that Edna Lewis understood about American cuisine that set her book apart at that time that other people were not getting or not describing like she was?
Well, I also had the benefit of being exposed to Miss Edna's yellow Lego paper. I was a young, aspiring journalist, and I encountered her in Los Angeles, and I shared with her that I was stunned to meet a woman who looked like her. And let's be frank, this is a time when the classic example of what it meant to be an African-American woman in food meant that we were talking about the plantation mammy character and Aunt Jemima. And so initially I had a reaction to her that was love at first sight. I just saw a statuesque, beautiful woman who was holding court in the lobby of a hotel. And this was not something that African Americans were known to be doing at that time. And so I told her how moved I was and that I wanted to research and understand about more women like her. And she wrote a letter to me, and the letter begins, it's 5:30 in the morning, and I cannot sleep. I have been thinking about that conversation that we had. She goes on in that same vein to write pages with no periods. But she leaves me with the challenge, which is the root of my work, and she says, I want you to leave no stone unturned in finding out who these women were. So your question, did she know? I don't know what she knew in 1976. What she was in pursuit of at that time was the preservation of the food. Later, she became, maybe because I was the first African-American food editor and she could see the legacy happening, I'm not sure. So I think she did eventually come around to the idea that the stories of the women who had been cooking and creating this community and life that you remember so lovely, she obviously came around to that. But I think what her goal was in the beginning was just to preserve the sanctity of what true Southern cooking was and to steer people's attention away from, as you called them, the greatest hits. But when you speak about African American food, those greatest hits are usually the foods of poverty and survival, and with no disparagement to the creators who had to make a way from no way, which is certainly important for us to remember. She represents an entirely different aspect to African American cooking, and I will say that one way that she wanted to preserve it in the post-publishing years of her life was to create an organization called the Society for the Preservation and Revival, something like that, of Southern cooking. So it was still about cooking. And that organization is the seed organization for the Southern Foodways Alliance.
I mean, her legacy lives on in so many ways. And I want to know from you, Nina, what did you discover about your aunt or your family when you were 12 years old, but now 50 years after you helped shape this book, are you still discovering new things about your aunt and your family and American foodways in general that your aunt really helped give a voice to?
Yes, definitely. I mean, I look around at all the people. I look at Toni Tipton-Martin and what you've done. And Edna always wanted to write the great tome about American cooking, the roots of American cooking, the indigenous roots, the African roots, and the European roots. And she felt that she didn't get to that. And I was recently writing a Dear Aunt Edna letter. And I said, Aunt Edna, your dream came true through Toni and through all the people, all of you sitting here, all the young people that are taking ethnic food studies and sustainable agriculture. Your dream lives on. Your dream has come true. Everything that you wanted to do has been done by people who were inspired by you. I think about the fact that she always told me that she felt that Freetown was important, and there were a lot of lessons in Freetown. She'd never met any people like the people of Freetown, and she wanted that lesson to go forward. And I see her as accomplishing that, starting with, the Taste of Country Cooking and everyone's continued interest. The people would be this tiny little town of people that were given land or they purchased land from the former slaveholders. They built a town. They built a community. They had activities. They hired a teacher to come teach in her grandfather's living room. So those are the kinds of things that she wants everyone to know about and to remember and to want to learn more about.
The thought of that is, it's such a well-rounded view of who Edna Lewis was. From my understanding, I was never fortunate enough to meet her, but when I was a student at the Institute of Culinary Education, there was this massive poster board in the hallway one day, and it said, the most influential chefs of New York. And there was a picture of Patrick Clark on there and a picture of Edna Lewis. Now, I had gone to the Halloween party every year at Tavern on the Green, so I knew who Patrick Clark was. But I did not know who Edna Lewis was until I saw that, and this was pre-smartphone. Yes, I'm old. So I had to go to the library in the culinary school and look up who Edna Lewis was, and that's when I started to come across her books. And so, Toni, you knew her professionally and got to know her even better through her writing. So I want to know, as a historian, what was your perception of how you interpret Miss Edna's voice? And how do you see her?
That's a good question. I have to admit, even though the publisher's in the room, I think I might even admit it in my foreword, that this book was not my favorite. I love all of her work and I love her. But if I had to choose a favorite, this is not my favorite.
What is?
My favorite is the first book, the Edna Lewis cookbook. And it is because at its purest sense, you get a chance to see her in her New York style. You get a chance to understand her as a person who was completely well-rounded, as you said. She comes out of this Southern food tradition, which is cooking right from the soil, healthy, nutritious, foods that are alive and clean. And then she comes into New York and she encounters classic training. And we never, ever connected African Americans to French classic training. Even right up until learning about James Hemings, there was always some kind of a qualification, to minimize whatever it was that they learned. They were still doing the labor. They were still doing the hard labor. And what we get to see is her creative artistry in that book. And yet it's still very simple. And so I just really love knowing that she was brilliant and talented, but she was also very down to earth. And the reason her story lives on is because it's a timeless story. The food is timeless. It's not contrived and overly chef-ied up. I'm looking at Faria. It's not like, it's elegant. And that was what was so important to me, was conveying the beauty of her, not only in her visual, but in her expression of her cooking, and also her encouragement for all of us in the realm of self-care. That healthy cooking and cooking from the farm is food that makes you alive. And that was another aspect of who she was and is still on the pages of this book.
Now, Miss Nina, I know I'm a proud auntie, so my niece might describe me differently than other people would. So how does Miss Toni's description of your aunt compare with your memories of her?
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah, no, that's a good one. No, everything that Toni said is definitely, my Aunt Edna. I certainly remember her. There's the cooking part, the cooking aspect that I will never forget. But I also remember, and I was telling you this earlier, when my mother was ill in 1970, Aunt Edna and her husband moved out of their apartment. We moved across the street. My mom had to be hospitalized for nearly a year. She had a relapse of tuberculosis. And to me, that was Aunt Edna. And I knew that when their mother died, when my mom was about 12 or 13, Aunt Edna brought her from the farm to New York City, enrolled her in Julia Richmond High School and in the New York Art Students League. So that to me was Aunt Edna. And I learned that she loved our family. She loved the community of Freetown. In her mind, this was all an extension, and it was all connected. And to have all of that together, that's what I remember about my aunt. In addition to her love of Africa and everything African, that defined myself as an African-American woman was just the world to me. But those are the kinds of things I would add to that food piece. And seeing her in the kitchen, testing all those recipes on our little stove in our railroad apartment in the South Bronx, 138th Street, between Willis and Brook, I would add that to the description.
I love that. I kind of wonder 50 years from now how my niece would describe me, and I doubt that's it. But I love that because it shows so much that Miss Edna's cooking, like you said, Toni, it didn't come from a place of deprivation. It came from a place of abundance. Mm-hmm. It came from a place of celebrating your family, what was near you, who made it, and that is what you both have embodied throughout your careers and your work. And Miss Toni, you have spent your entire life kind of shining a light on defining what American cuisine is. So many people ask that, especially to chefs. When you tell them, oh, I cook modern American cuisine, and they ask you, what does that mean? It really started with Edna Lewis defining what American foodways are, and then Toni bringing it into the modern lens and helping pull that thread on all the people that existed throughout all the years. So thank you both so much for being here today and helping, talk more about the 50th anniversary of this pivotal, deeply, deeply impactful book that has influenced so many people, from Alice Waters in California to Ferial and so many other chefs in our industry. Thank you both so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much to Toni, Nina, Adrienne, and Adé. Be sure to pick up a copy of The Taste of Country Cooking if you don't already have it. The 50th anniversary edition features a foreword by Toni. Next up is a Jubilee solo talk from Mariana Velásquez, author of the cookbooks Revel and Colombiana. Mariana shares what happened when the end of her marriage coincided with the deadline for her latest cookbook.
When I was finishing my second cookbook, a book about gathering and revelry, my marriage imploded. 3 weeks before Christmas, I cut ties with the husband, partner, best friend for whom I had cooked thousands of meals. And I was left with an empty table that I did not recognize, and a manuscript that no longer sang true. 86 recipes, 280 pages, and 7 days until my deadline. So I sat in my kitchen table with the printed pages, paper spilling where people used to sit, and tightly gripping a red pen. Each pronoun confronted me. Striking through our and mending it with my felt both numbing and nuclear. On the screen, I used Control F to find and delete his name 63 times. Wednesday dinner with him, never again. I changed it to Wednesday dinner, the introduction, and the chapter of his birthday menu. Together we had built a language through meals, inside jokes through playlists, and a sense of home that everyone who walked into our home felt. For months after the separation, the mere thought of turning on the stove was unthinkable. Opening the refrigerator made me lightheaded, and I had stopped trusting myself. both in life and in the kitchen. Then, on a brittle April morning, my French friend Anna called. She was in tears about not having plans for her birthday. I have nothing organized at all, and all I want is something with cream, she said. And I heard myself say, come over for dinner, I'll organize. My host's heart stronger than my broken one. I immediately regretted it. I did not have enough balls for 6. My refrigerator held only mustard, kimchi, and crusty jam from my other life. I didn't even have a ladle. I started to spiral, but instead I paused. And I asked myself why inviting friends over mattered to me in the first place. So much so that I had written a whole book about it. Hosting at its core had always been an intimate act of amplitude. Not to impress, not to perform, and especially not to prove. It was about gathering delicious food, dancing until dawn, and providing the right light for kissing. I had lost sight of the fact that it was okay to invite people into a space with enough matching plates, with a tiny oven and no serving platters. In a home that was wholly mine, love could still arrive in bread slathered in butter, anchovies and champagne, in acceptable takeout, in bites of decadent cake, in laughter that stretched late into the night. So I kept rewriting. I thought I was editing. And in fact, I was augmenting. And my voice shifted. No longer the plural we of marriage, but the singular I of a woman choosing to revel. The book I turned in was not the book I had set out to cook. It was tastier. And not because the pain had vanished, but because it shed the burden of perfection. Months earlier, I had used Control F to delete his name 63 times. What I didn't know then was that every deletion was also making space. Space for new dinners, for new stories, and the possibility of cooking for someone new. And realizing once again that when in doubt, red wine, red lips, and roasted chicken. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Mariana. Be sure to pick up a copy of Revel or Colombiana, or hey, both, at a bookstore near you. That's it for today's show. Thank you for listening, and be sure to check out our Instagram for more Jubilee in July. We've got videos, photos, and lots more. Our theme song is by the band Tra La La. Our producers are Catherine Baker and Jenna Sadu. Our executive assistant is Bridget Pittman, and our head of partnerships is Rachel Close. Special thanks to Good Studio in Brooklyn. Thanks for listening, everybody. You're the bomb.